Lee Spencer begins each morning like many of us. But that's where any similarities between what Lee does and what most people do ends.
The first year I came up here, I lived in a tent for the 7 months I was here. About 3 years later, decided to upgrade the trailer to an Airstream. And right now, it's as comfortable a place for me to work as any place I know or really ever have had.
Lee's Airstream and a creekside workbench are his office. And what Lee does here is watch fish. But if not for Lee, these steelhead might not be here.
This pool below me here holds hundreds of wild steelhead, and it used to get terribly poached, including dynamiting. It's known to a lot of local people as the Dynamite Hole. In 1993, there was a final dynamiting event. After that, people all got together and said, we've got to get a volunteer presence up here to make sure this doesn't happen again. And of course, for every dynamiting, there were 20 or 30 snaggings of other types.
The dynamiters targeted one of the most productive steelhead spawning areas around. 30% of North Umpqua steelhead spawn in this tributary. This vandalism threatened to destroy the steelhead runs that make the Umpqua River famous. Lee stepped up to make sure these fish had a future.
My agreement is to spend 12 of every 24 hours at the pool, which includes every evening. Basically, just being here is enough to dissuade people who would be interested in poaching, I think.
These steelhead began their lives as tiny trout emerging from Steamboat Creek. From there, they descended to the North Umpqua, dropping over raging falls and navigating long reaches of whitewater to enter the ocean near Reedsport. They spend years at sea, dodging fishermen's nets and sea lions, only to return as adults to spawning beds at the place of their birth. But here's the mysterious part. Before they reach their spawning beds, they come to the Dynamite Hole, a pool that's kept cool by inflow from surrounding creeks. The fish stop, not for days, but for months.
They need to have a temperature refuge. If they're at ease, if they're not spooked, they're holding very still, and they're trying to use as little energy as possible because they're not feeding.
The steelhead will wait here up to 10 months. When spawning season comes in February, the rest of the creek is cool enough that the fish can then comfortably move upstream. But for as long as the fish feel like sticking around, Lee will be here, watching over them.
This is my 9th year, and my 200 days a season, my 1800th day or something like that here. And it's a delight.
Lee does take advantage of the perks of the job, namely access to the fly fishing paradise of the North Umpqua, just downstream.
The things that draw steelheaders to this river, fly anglers to this river, is it's a long tradition of fly angling, goes back more than 50 years. The fish average 3 to 4 pounds heavier than the average for summer steelhead in this part of the Northwest. And there are very large steelhead in this river, 20-pound fish.
Lee doesn't really care if the fish don't bite. Likewise, success on the job at the Dynamite Hole is judged by what doesn't happen.
I decided after the first day of deterring poachers that there had to be a little bit more than that to it. So I pulled out a notebook and I jerry-rigged a platform to sit at, and I just started taking notes about the wild steelhead, which have burgeoned into notes about the creek, about other animals on the creek, about the interactions of them all. Kingfisher just flew by. I've learned to appreciate the fish more as a curious creature that's aware of the world around it in an intimate scale and watches the world around it.
So will this pool get completely full of salmon?
No. I'm regularly asked, so you count the fish? And I do keep track of how many fish are in the pool, but my purpose here is a little bit more fundamental than that. It's to make sure that people don't harass the fish.
It's a bit different to our jobs, which are, working in offices and dealing with telephones and computers, and it must be just amazing to watch a pool of fish instead of a computer screen.
You can't do anything but admire it. Thanks a lot. See you later.
It's a good, positive, simple way to do something for the world that I've lived in for the last 57 years. It has allowed me to read books that I would not otherwise have read, to watch very interesting creatures interact with their environment, to give my dog a good life, and to occasionally go down to the river and cast a fly for steelhead. I think it's a good life.